Hi, my name is Katie Iverson, and for this 2-week cycle for Education 200, we are supposed to focus on one of the course essential questions. I decided to focus on the question, who am I and what motivates me? As I thought about the questions that I wanted to create, I decided to take a more personal approach and sort of apply the questions to myself as a learner. Since I myself am still learning, I'm still a student, and I hope that I can use my own experiences to relate more to my students someday, so that I can help them since I've already been there. But as I thought about these questions, I also tried to think of ways that they could apply to students, and so hopefully this will help. The 3 questions that I thought of were: what inspires me to gain knowledge? How do I use the knowledge I obtain in my daily life? And does the way I learn define who I am, or does who I am define the way I learn? So, as I explain and answer each of these questions, hopefully you'll be able to see how a student might be able to relate to these questions and might be able to answer them, ask them to themselves. So the first question was, what inspires me to gain knowledge? And the first thing that I thought of when I thought of this question, because I didn't realize how broad it was when I thought of it, was pretty much anything, the world that surrounds us. For example, you hear a lot about the presidential elections, so maybe hearing about that might inspire you, might spark an interest, like, oh, maybe I should look into politics, maybe I should see what that's about. Or you might hear something to do with medical science that might make you want to research it. The same can be said if you see some artwork or music or drama or anything that you hear could spark an interest in you, which could make you want to learn more about it. Something else that I've thought of that inspires me to gain knowledge could be personal goals. For example, say I have a goal. Better yet, I'll use the example of my mother, because she's probably the best learner I've ever seen in my life. She had the goal of remodeling all 3 of the bathrooms in our house. She'd never remodeled anything in her life, so what she did was she went to the library and she researched every book she could find. She went on YouTube, saw every video she could find, and she did it. She remodeled 3 bathrooms that way. Because she had the goal that she wanted to redo those bathrooms, she was inspired to learn about how to do it. Because if she never looked into it and gained that knowledge, she never would have been able to accomplish her goals. And in the end she did, and she gained a lot of knowledge that way. And so with any goals we have, that makes us gain knowledge. We have the goal to become teachers, and so we are gaining knowledge on how to teach. And students, they have the same goals. They just need to find out what they are. They need to find a goal that will inspire them to learn. The second question is, how do I use the knowledge I obtain in my daily life? In my mother's example, she can't go around remodeling everyone's bathroom. But I think the best way to use that knowledge on a daily basis is to continue learning about it more and more. For example, with our scripture studies, we can read the Book of Mormon or the Bible or any of the canonical works all the way through, but if we don't continue learning more about it every day and reading more and reading what the prophets have to say about it, it's like if we leave a tool on the rain, it'll get rusty. And so we have to constantly be applying it in our lives, or constantly refreshing our memory. So I think for the same reason, teachers have to go back to school every couple of years so they can be up to date on today's curriculum. Also, another way we can use the knowledge is by helping others learn. Sort of, for example, with the BYU-Idaho student learning model, how the learning model is that students help teach other students and help them learn, so they both learn mutually. If we help another person and teach another person how to do something, we ourselves might find a better way of doing it before that we might not have noticed before. And so by helping others learn and by constantly refreshing our memory and constantly striving to learn more and be better, that way we can use that knowledge on a daily basis. And as for my last question, does the way I learn define who I am, or does who I am define the way I learn? This was definitely a more personal question for me, because school has always been a little bit more difficult for me, which is funny that I want to be a teacher. But I've always been suspicious that I might have had a mild form of ADD. My brother was diagnosed with ADHD. I think it runs in the family. Not an excuse. But school was always a little difficult because I would always find it hard to focus and always be a little distracted and lacking motivation. Maybe I wasn't inspired enough. I don't know. But a dangerous habit that I realized later on in my life as I got over my obstacles was oftentimes in elementary school or just as a child, the way that teachers would teach me, instead of helping me to get over those those obstacles I had for myself, I felt more shamed than helped. For example, I often felt that the second part of that question, who I was, defined the way I learned. That there wasn't anything I could do. That I was just that way, always. And that was just how it was. And the teachers didn't really help me see that it was the other way around. That the way I learned could define who I was. That habits can change and new habits can be learned. And so, because the way we learn and the way that we seek knowledge can help us build towards a better future. If we learn good habits, for example, I may never stop procrastinating. I may never be 100% focused all the time. But I can learn the habits that will help me get things done in a better way. And I'm not sure if I'm answering this question to the best way possible, but this is a question I think I've been trying to answer my whole life. And I'm pretty sure there are plenty of students that have been asking themselves the same question. Where does the way I learn define who I am? Does the way I think and the way that I seek knowledge, does that define who I am and who I will be in the future? How I will set up the stepping stones to the rest of my life? Or does who I am now, who I am, the habits that I have, will that define how I learn? Will that define how I succeed? I suppose it's a difficult, confusing question, but I think what's really important is that who we are can change, and we can always become better. We can always reach those goals. We can become teachers, even if school was hard. And in conclusion, I learned that it's important to be inspired to look for knowledge. It's important to want to learn. It's important to be hungry, like it says in the scriptures, to feast on the words of Christ. And not just on His words, on any words. and I hope that part of this video helped and that it didn't completely confuse you. I was kind of working it out in my head like, oh, this is good stuff. So hopefully it helped you as well. And thank you very much.